Hey, Pastor Ken here, answering another submitted question from our God's Design series. And the question is, what about intersex individuals? What if the parents make a choice at birth that isn't consistent with God's plan? A really good question. Really, that is a difficult one to really kind of wrap our minds around. So I want to address the issue of intersex just briefly. And I'm no expert, I'm no authority, so to speak, on the topic. But from the things that I've read, and I want to share some, is number one, intersex is a little bit of it's a term that people who are pushing a gender ideology tend to go to often to say, oh, well, what about this? For those who insist that there is just a gender binary, right? So there's male or female. There's only two options. Or another word for that is dimorphic. There's two forms of humans, male and female. And then they would say, well, what about intersex? This is this thing that doesn't fit the mold of a binary gendered system. And sometimes they even have statistics that up to 1.7% of all births are of intersex people. Well, that statistic is very misleading because typically, when people are asking this question, this specific question, where maybe parents have to make a choice at birth that the gender is not obvious, that is not what makes up the 1.7% statistic. What technically falls under the condition of intersex are a lot of other conditions where chromosomes maybe are a little bit tweaked or different, and there's no ambiguity or no question as to the sex of that baby, right? It's clearly, in most instances, they're clearly male or clearly female. And in situations, usually blood tests or ultrasounds and stuff, they can actually find out if there is a little bit of physical difference than normal. They can pretty easily these days find out like what is that true sex of that baby. And in conditions that actually require like a doctor to get some help or some specialists to say, okay, we're having trouble determining the actual gender. That incidence or that percentage is actually 0.04%, not 1.7. So it's a huge difference from what is sometimes touted in publications and so forth about intersex individuals. So the question is, what if the parents make a wrong choice? So what if it's one of these 0.04 percent of cases where there's genuinely a question as to if this baby is male or female? And like I said, in most situations today, a blood test, an ultrasound can help give direction. And some popular studies cite cases from the past before modern medicine was able to determine, more clearly where someone was raised as a boy, but turns out, that they really should have been raised as a girl. And like I said, those cases usually are from the past when they didn't have those benefits of medicine. Honestly, it's a really hard situation to think about parents that have to make that decision. And what we need to recognize is that that's a very hard call to make. I mean, and again, this is about birth defects. This is what this is about. This isn't about any situation of internal feelings or anything like that. This is a legitimate situation of birth defect, just like if they're conjoined twins, right? So a birth defect where there's twins, but they're born and they didn't develop properly in the womb, and they're conjoined. In other words, they're connected. And when you think about parents who are in that situation, and we've heard of stories, right, where their parents have to say, we could give this child a better chance of living if we disconnect this other one that has a less chance of living. And and imagine the horror of being in that situation as a parent. And so that's really hard. This isn't quite that difficult. It doesn't quite have the same consequence, but it's in the same realm of trying to be able to say from an outside perspective, well, parents should just do this. Parents should just do that. And I think we need to avoid trying to make blanket statements like that in these cases of severe birth defects, to just believe that you can, from an outsider perspective, just make a blanket statement. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. I believe parents in those cases have to make a difficult choice. But again, this is an extremely rare situation that tends to be made more common by misinterpreting or mispresenting the facts of the cases. So again, I don't have a clear, I don't think there's a biblically clear direction as to say, well, if a parent finds themselves in a place where they have to make a decision, again, I don't think there's a clear definitive answer in that, but the actual incidence of that happening is so small that, you pray for God's wisdom and direction, and you go from there. So hopefully that's helpful in some way. God bless.